Yes, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you. I had to get on to gallery view so I could see all the humans that are in the room here. So glad you're with us. So my name's Amy Brooks. I'm a UU minister. I work with Green Faith, and I've helped to put together this conference. And we're so glad to have you here in our breakout room where we talk about discerning your green path. And I am not the speaker. Instead, it is the Reverend Scott Harden Neary, my colleague and friend. And so let me just tell you a little bit about Scott, and then I'm going to invite him to take it away. And Scott, I'm here to support you and help you however you need. So let me know if there's something that we can do as you share with us your wisdom. So Scott is a dad and partner to Becca, and he cares deeply about people and God's planet. He's an ordained pastor with the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and he has received a Master's of Divinity degree and diploma in the art of spiritual direction from San Francisco Theological Seminary. And before moving to Western North Carolina, Scott and his family served in the vulnerable cloud forest of Monteverde, Costa Rica. Scott continues to become aware of the deep connections among pollution, poverty, violence, racism, mental health, oppression, climate change, and spirituality. He works with Green Chalice and previously has worked with the Creation Care Alliance, where he supported congregations and individuals as they care for people in the planet. He now is serving as the director of Bethany Congregations, a ministry accompanying congregations through transformative seasons. So thank you, Scott, and welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Amy. I'm grateful to be here. And I'll be sharing my screen in just a little bit with kind of walking through some slides, but I want to begin like I often begin with the original scriptures that were written into creation, which are remembering nature. And so it's just kind of an opening space for us. And I know that several of you have been going between different sessions and seminars, and so invite you to take a pause and breathe deeply. And remember, if you can, a time in nature where you experienced awe or gratitude or God. Try to remember, just silently now, a time when you were in nature and experienced mystery or awe, or what some might call a God moment. And as you scroll through your memories, if you find one, I invite you to fill out that memory a little bit with me. Try to remember, if you can, the people or creatures that were around you. Who were the others that were there, the other living beings? Try to remember the lighting and the colors that were prevalent in that time that you're remembering. Remember now what you heard, perhaps waves crashing or a gentle breeze. Can you remember the way it smelled during this time? The scent of your experience? If you're able, try to recall the temperature or the ways that you felt. If you're able, how did you react to this moment? What were some of your thoughts or prevailing feelings during this time? And when you're ready, I invite you to offer gratitude to Spirit or to your own life or to God for remembering this moment. And invite you to turn back your video back on if you're open to that. And I'll invite you to if I would imagine by now that you're practiced in the chat box. I wonder if you're able to put one of the main characters of your memory in the chat, and maybe a prevailing feeling that you had or a reaction that you had. So it might be, yeah, Mama Dear, Sarah says. And then what was a prevailing, like what did you notice about that when you were there with that? A beautiful, deep gratitude, wonder, magic, Holy Spirit. Others, go ahead and put in the chat if you're open to sharing a main character of your memory and a reaction to that or something you noticed about it. Doug Moselle, is that how you say? With a sense of communion with land and critters. Dusk, with a Buddhist monk on the other side of the world, a sense of oneness. Tears, I cried. Vicky joined a little bit late. We're happy to share with you what happened a little bit later on. But just remembering a time in nature that we notice God or mystery or awe. Well, thank you for listening to your own lives and for reading that scripture that was written into being before written words, the scripture of creation. Grateful for that. Part of my understanding of neighbor and God were expanded when I had the opportunity to serve in Monteverde, Costa Rica. And during that time, some of the formative moments for me grew my understanding of this passage, which is in the Christian New Testament and is part of my upbringing and part of the important ways that I experience my faith. One of the scribes came near. Sorry, I'm trying to read it and it's hard to see. Came near them and disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is the first of all?" This is some of the scribes talking with Jesus. Jesus answered, "The first is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind and all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." And so as my family and I served in this little mountain town in the vulnerable cloud forest of Monteverde, my understanding of neighborhood grew exponentially. I began to notice my human neighbors, of course, who were speaking Spanish and were from a variety of backgrounds, but also my non-human neighbors were more prevalent to me. We lived in this cloud forest, which was it's like similar to a rainforest, only about 4,500 feet. It's on the continental divide of Costa Rica between Panama and Nicaragua, the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. It's incredibly biodiverse. These are some of the neighbors, just to greet you. This caterpillar actually lives in the Appalachians as well, and it's not a caterpillar, it's a millipede. And some of the wonderful things that I found out about this millipede is it has 3 defense mechanisms to protect it from others. And one is to roll up like a roly-poly, and some of you may have seen something like that. The second is to poop and to release kind of toxins in that way and to make itself taste poorly to other animals. And then the third is that between those scales, it releases little bits of cyanide gas. And so it will smell like sweet almonds or cherry if you're able to get past the other 2 defenses to disturb it long enough to smell that cherry scent. So this is one of our neighbors. This was outside of our home, and that's my hand. And a little grasshopper that had hit, it sounded like somebody banging on the door, and we went outside, and this grasshopper was there with his little neckerchief, just greeting us in the neighborhood. This is a sloth that was outside of our home, a mom and a baby. And the amazing thing about this neighbor is that it can host a whole slew of other neighbors on its back. And so some scientists would tell me that up to 75 other kinds of plants and animals would live on a sloth at any given moment, different species of plants and animals. That this is its own little ecosystem. It has moths that will eat the moss that grows on the back of a sloth, and it makes it a little bit more camouflaged because it turns a little bit green with this moss, and a particular moth that is endemic to a sloth will eat that moss to keep it in check. And so there's all sorts of little ecosystems that are happening just within this one creature. And so we're grateful to have this as one of our neighbors. This is a bellbird. So a 3-wattled bellbird, and it's got 2 mustaches on one side and 1 mustache on the other side. And this is endemic to Costa Rica and Panama. And this is a juvenile or teenager. And you can see he's sitting on the edge of a branch there, probably calling out to find a date for the evening or to protect this space. And that's one of the loudest sounds in nature. About 2 kilometers, it can travel that far, that sound. And so this is one of our neighbors, and we got to learn all sorts of fun things about the 3-wattled bellbird. This is a resplendent quetzal that lived in the cloud forest as well. And this is a very clumsy but amazing male bird that lived in the cloud forest of Monteverde. And if you were able to see probably another size slide, the same size, the tail would continue on. It's just really, really long, beautiful tail. And these birds, I was walking in the forest one day, and one of the guides that was a friend of ours, I heard something thump in the forest, and I went over and he said, pick that up. And it looked like a little acorn, and I picked it up. And he said, describe it to me. And I told him the size of it and that it was warm. And he said, well, that's an avocado seed. And either a quetzal or a bellbird had regurgitated it up after eating it and digesting the outside meat of it. And so I was holding this little guacamole seed from an avocado tree. And this is the avocado size. That's the species of avocado among the 30 that were there in Monteverde. So this interconnectedness of God's creation became more and more prevalent to my understanding of God's realm and life in general. Our goals for today, and is besides just being together and learning with one another, is to lean into the wisdom of space and discernment, contemplation, and deep listening, the spaciousness, at the same time connecting the urgency of compassion with intentional action. using your particular gifts, your passions, your resources, relationships, and skills. And that's one of the challenges of climate change, is that it is an urgent problem that needed to be fixed 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so we don't have much time. And for people of faith, we tend to want to work our way out of it. And we have the opportunity to do the both and of listening deeply and reacting with urgency. So we're going to kind of go through this workshop, and you'll get to dance a little bit with this this duality of wisdom and urgency. Judith Glickson is a therapist, but she's also a professional musician who plays a cello, and she would call herself a type A personality. And during a moment of Sabbath, she was so distraught about climate change, she took some time off, and she was taking weeks and weeks at a time to breathe and to listen. And in the midst of that, became aware that she wanted to do something about climate change. And so she created this concert series called One Cello, One Planet. And she began to raise funds and raise awareness about climate change through her practice of playing cello. And we had the opportunity to work with her, and she was able to use both her own wisdom and this deep listening to her own gifts to engage in climate action right now. She didn't go out and get a master's degree in sustainable development or ecological communities. She knew how to play the cello, and she had a passion for climate action. And so she put both of those together. And that's a way that we're inviting congregations to step into their own gifts and their own passions to make some change. As you know, and you probably heard some of this before, that these ways of engaging in ecological damage is through mitigation, which is to stop or slow down the damage that's being done either by climate change or plastic pollution or deforestation, is to stop it and reduce the rate for climate change at which fossil fuels are burned. Another reaction or way to cope is to adapt. That's individuals or collectives to reduce the impacts of climate change. Whether you're planting trees that are less likely to grow in Georgia, like there are now more and more peach trees are growing in North Carolina, and we had South Carolina peach trees, but it used to be the Georgia peach. And so as things change, we need to adapt to that. Now, the U.S. military, Walmart, so many organizations are able to do mitigation and adaptation, and faith communities are among those, and we are grateful and believe that these two kinds of actions are crucial for our ways of moving forward. But for faith communities, that's not the end of the story. Gus Speth spells it out nicely for us. And he says, I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Who knows how to do that? Amy does.
No, I think I have an answer. I don't know that I'd say Amy does.
Yes. At our best, faith communities, that's our role. That's one of our roles, is to bring about cultural and spiritual transformation in a society that's broken. And the scientists are inviting us, pleading with us to step into this work, using our gifts, our capacity for cultural and spiritual transformation to bring about change. Faith communities at our best, again, at our best. We've been at our worst before, and some of us are not acting all that great right now, but at our best, and the ones on this call, think generationally. We do think about how we might pass down the faith, these traditions, these values to not only the generation to come, but the generation after that. Like that is something that faith communities do, different than thinking about the next quarter or the next election cycle. We think about 20, 30, 100 years from now, and that's when we're at our best. We as faith communities hold stories of resilience and hope, not only in the scriptures that are sacred to us, but also in the histories closer to us and just the faith communities that we reside in now. We know that we've been challenged and that we've seen hope in the midst of that, and we still exist. We know how to do relationships, even though I've heard many congregations split and create new denominations over carpet or styrofoam cups. We still, at our best, know how to do relationships. We know how to do fights, and we know how to make up for the long haul. There's not a whole lot of places left where people on the right and left can sit in the same room and worship and eat together. But the faith communities at our best, again, have that capacity. And then lastly, we have an element of the holy creative or the prophetic imagination that is a part of how we imagine the world to be. And then we can act on that imagined reality and faithfully work toward how we might engage the world. So you might imagine, if you're a part of a faith community today, that you could take this process back with you to your congregation, to your synagogue or church or whatever neighborhood association. And so as we're going through these next steps, you might just think, okay, what would this look like for my neighborhood or for my congregation as we do these steps? First is listening to your community. And so as we look around and we realize that each, just like each individual has a different set of strengths and resources, each congregation or community have unique strengths and resources. And so if we were together, I would hand you a piece of paper and a golf pencil or something like that, and invite you to write down, as you're imagining your community, how you might fill these out. And so I'm just going to give you just a minute or so per quadrant here to just imagine it. I didn't ask you to bring paper or pen with you, so you didn't know there was going to be homework associated with this workshop. But we'll just take a little bit of time for you to write down, as you think about your congregation or your neighborhood or even your household. What are some of your strengths, skills, your passions? What are you known for in the community? And if you're feeling courageous, you could just put some of those in the chat if you just want to get it out because you're remembering it. Otherwise, you could just jot it on a piece of paper or just think about it. I recognize this whole, just this exercise could take a full hour with a congregational leadership team, or could take even a half day. It could be during a retreat or something. The next would be just, what kind of relationships do you have? What kind of resources do you have? What abilities do you have? Does your congregation have land? Do you have buildings? Do you have an endowment fund or finances, or even loan officers within your congregation? Do you have volunteers that are really excited? Do you have teachers? Do you have preachers? Do you have musicians? What are the resources that are available to you? Next, noticing where you're located. And a lot of our congregations have changing demographics, just thinking about who are the people in your neighborhood, what are the passions or needs of your neighborhood. Where are the creeks or the watersheds? Where does the water run on your streets? Where does it end up? What congressional district are you from? Where do your participants for your community come from? So where are you located? What are the unique needs and opportunities that you have in your place? And lastly, of those quadrants are what time is it? What is this moment for your community? And this might be nationally. This might, like clearly COVID-19 and racism and climate change. These are calling for particular ways of being in the world. So there's this time that's really ripe right now for reactions in those realms. But in your own community, maybe there's a leadership change that's happening, which makes it more difficult to do some of the work that you've imagined, or maybe it's sometimes it makes it a little easier when there's a leadership transition happening in your congregation. So you think to yourself, hey, this is the right time for us to engage this. What's stirring in your own neighborhood or in your town or county that might be relevant for the kinds of work that you did? What does the world need from you and your community right now, today? So I'm worried we're going to run out of time, but at some point we may break into smaller groups, or we can just talk together and just kind of process some of this. But I'm just going to keep on rolling right now, and I can't really see the chat. So if people are, Amy, if you see anything in the chat that really needs to happen, let me know. So we have this mitigation, adaptation, and the third piece that I've just kind of begun to explore is this loving our neighbor, loving God, and loving self, that we have the opportunity to engage compassionately as things change, as things get harder. And you're going to hear, if you haven't already heard, that our climate is changing, and there are a lot of things that are devolving. And so the faith communities have this opportunity to really lean into our ability to be compassionate in the midst of highly stressful situations. So mitigation, adaptation, and compassion. This next tool is just as a way to think about these three. And if you were doing different ministries in your congregation, or if even you had a youth ministry and you wanted to think about, okay, how could we do some work together? Adaptation, mitigation, compassion. The individual level, like what can I do? Like I might become a vegetarian, and so that might be both mitigation and adaptation, and for it also might be compassionate. And so that would be one way to be in the world individually. As a community, maybe your faith community is ready to go solar or to grow food for your neighborhood, and that might be an adaptation to help food insecurity in your neighborhood, and also might be compassionate. So you can just begin to think about where are the sweet spots. Community, individual actions are easier to change. You're able to do that more quickly, so you can impact that. Community is relatively soon. Like our faith communities can make decisions, even though it's difficult for many of our faith communities, but we can make decisions within a year or 2 years, and that's relatively short compared to what a global decision would be, or what a national decision would be. So there's kind of a sweet spot with faith communities in that we can impact change as individuals within our communities at a relatively fast pace, and making a greater impact than just an individual decision. And so that's one of the reasons why this work with your community is important. So there are many ways to do creation care, and many of you have danced with a lot of different variety of ways to deal with climate change, but then also creation care in general. These are 6 kind of general categories that we've found that faith communities are engaging in the world and that they might engage around creation care or climate change. And so these are kind of the general 6. It's going to get overwhelming, so just be ready for it. So these 6: spirituality, worship, buildings and grounds, education, fellowship and outreach, sustainability, and advocacy and finance. So there are 27 subcategories under sustainability. We have pollution, food, transportation. And so you can just look through these. And as you're thinking about, so the process is, as you've done that, listening to your congregation or community practice, you might be able to notice, where is our congregation already doing something that might fall in these categories. So you might already have worship that is going strong, and that might be a place where you feel like you could do some creation care with preaching, teaching, music. And so in that case, you might think liturgy and worship would be a way to engage this. So as you're looking at these 27, the white script there, try to pick out maybe 2 of these topics that are interesting to you, and maybe 2 that you think might be a starting place for your congregation, either that you're already doing it, or that there's a little bit of energy around Vacation Bible School already. And so, all right, well, let's go with where the Spirit's already moving. So 2 for yourself and 2 for your faith community. And if you're brave, you can put it in the chat. I can't really see the chat while I'm sharing, but feel free to put it in the chat, or just jot it down, or just think of it. If we were in your fellowship hall or with your congregation, then what you might do is ask everyone to share. Like, so I would pass this out, and you would just circle maybe the top 2 that you're excited about, and maybe the top 2 that your congregation is excited about, and then we could just go around and kind of vote and just see, what comes to the surface. So my experience of this is that you would have maybe 5 of these that would have the most votes. And so of those 5, they may not be recycling and solar panels in a church garden, which are the top 3. Whenever I'm talking to a faith community, they want to do that, but they don't always have the land or the energy or the finances or those sorts of things. So those top 5 might not be the ones that you would have normally thought about before, but it would allow you to begin to listen to what I consider the Spirit of God, and how that Spirit is already moving in your congregation, and how do you accompany that Spirit with a creation care lens. So that would be a way for you to kind of begin to look at, where do we start? Because that can be so overwhelming when there's so many problems. This could be a way to listen to where you've already started moving. So there's a page on our website, and I'll maybe Amy can help me put this in the chat. But it's a 2-page. This is what it looks like. Along the right-hand side are those 27 categories, and on the left-hand side are those 6 categories. And across the top, planting seeds, nurturing growth, and deepening roots are like the 101 to PhD level, or it takes the least amount of knowledge and resources. And the planting seeds it takes a little bit more to the deepening roots. And so if you said, yeah, music and worship is really where our congregation is focused, you could take a look at the planting seeds section in worship, and you could notice we're just going to focus on care for creation during a special worship service like Near Earth Day or during a Creation Care Sunday. And then moving down the line, you could do, okay, well, this year we want to have a sermon series about creation, or have references to creation, care, and worship throughout the year. That would be the last. So just thinking about how you might have a movement growing this work, and that would allow you to do that. This website down here, the creationcarealliance.org toolkit, is a way to find this. This is just a closer look at one of those sections, sustainability practices. And on the website, I'm not really trying to sell that. I don't work with Creation Care Alliance anymore, but I really trust this, the organization and this work. And so this is a way for your congregation to find resources. And so when you go on the website, you can click on these, and it will show you congregations that are already doing these steps and resources on how to get started on every one of these steps here, any one of those. So that's a way to begin. I'll just share, Amy, you're going to help me with timing to make sure I'm not going too far over. Okay. So these are just a few examples. You all are doing creation care. I believe that you're thinking about it or you're having a sense of it. So this is just a few images of congregations and some of the variety of what they've done. It's not a list of things to do. It's more of here are some of the ways that your sisters and brothers are already engaging in this, a way of providing you some support and hope in this work. So we've been having Earth Day vigils over the years, bringing together faith communities and different faiths from across Western North Carolina to share in prayers and music together. This is from 2018 at First Baptist downtown. This is one of the first congregations that have solar panels on their congregation, and in Black Mountain, North Carolina. And this is has Republicans and Democrats sitting in their pews, and they saw it as a really wise financial move and a stewardship decision to put solar panels on their roof. And from that, they've done also energy efficiency work and compostable cups, and it's generated a lot of movement from this decision. This is a congregation, Beth Israel, a Jewish congregation in Asheville that worked with an environmental nonprofit to plant apple trees, and they use those apples and that symbolism for some of their sacred holidays to use for teaching. And they don't have fences around these trees, and so the idea is that it can be a source of food for anyone that wants it from around the neighborhood. So it's both a justice issue, and it reduces their carbon footprint, and it's also a teaching tool in their faith community. St. Eugene's Catholic Church is the first Catholic church in North Carolina to have solar panels on, and this is a blessing of the inverters or panels, and they have 140 panels on their church. It's a beautiful solar array. And they wrote blessings on the back of a few of those panels with a Sharpie. They had during worship service a couple of Sundays in a row, they had people write prayers for the future and blessings of those panels as well. So the congregation, not just the priest, had an opportunity to bless. This is in Boone, the High Country, doing similar work together. This is in Western North Carolina, a small congregation of about 30 in worship, where they would not be comfortable really talking about climate change, but together they really cared deeply about their neighbors and took to heart the greatest commandment. And so they pulled together their gleaned vegetables, and the pastor got a grant for LED lights. And they went door to door to about 70 congregations and handed out these LED lights and food. And they estimate that they saved their neighborhood about $70,000 over the next 10 years if they screwed in the lights. But it's climate solution and a food security opportunity, but also just a neighborly thing to do. And that's the reason why they did it. That's them with their food and their LED lights about to go out. We've done LED light work, and you can learn more about that if you're interested. And I want to leave room for questions or comments.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to let you call on people yourself if that's comfortable. I don't need to moderate that unless you want me to.
No, that's great.
Or a small group. Just unmute and ask your question.
Or did anything resonate for you? Did anything stand out as something that was interesting or might be helpful?
I really like that grid as a way to kind of sit down with a group of people. And thankfully one of my folks is on with me. So, you know, maybe we'll trot that out in one of our meetings. So we're at the very beginning of, well, there has been a lot of creation care going on, but now we're really trying to focus on justice and advocacy, action, and so forth. So this is at St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Charlotte. And so we're about brainstorming right now, for sure. So.
Great. Thank you.
And yeah, taking the inventory of your gifts, that sounds very good.
One of the things,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things I really appreciate about the toolkit is the levels of engagement. So being able to have an entry level, a beginning place, and then to grow with it, I think that's really helpful. And I was on I just went to the website to look, and for those of you that haven't clicked on the link yet, there are really good, also local to Asheville, you know, kind of like ways to connect on these different topics. And so I think when we think about congregations and other spaces, looking for those kinds of connections locally, I think is a way that we can engage too. And yeah, I think that's a good framework.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, when you say local congregations, you mean people who are already doing things? Yeah, I think one of the things that I hope will come out of this conference is that as people get to know each other and hear what they're interested in, we'll be able to connect those who are doing this kind of work and those who are doing this kind of work and those who are doing this kind of work, because I think that strengthens our sense of connection and community when we can say, hey, there are X number of community gardens and this is how they're working and we know these people and this is what they're doing. Let's borrow that idea, reproduce it, or let's join them in this effort with what we have to bring to the table. Yeah.
And also organizations, you know, so that's the part, like the congregational connections and the organizations that can help us support the work that we can build partnerships with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's definitely more and more of an interest that Creation Care Alliance is kind of nested within an environmental nonprofit. And there's been more and more partnerships with across different kinds of justice groups and environmental groups and businesses with faith communities, and they can see the benefits of partnership in new ways, collaborative ways. And I think that's a benefit of the urgency of the time, is that we can see we really need everybody in this work, whether it is around justice issues or environmental care, that we're beyond time of working together. And so I think that's a good, Sarah, that's a good point, is it's not just faith communities. That's super interesting too, and good to be able to influence and care for each other in the midst of growing this kind of work, but also other organizations as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're often surprised by faith communities that are willing to do this, and it's not surprising to us because we're, it's like who's who we are, but like there's, depending on the kind of faith, we don't have a great reputation for caring for our neighbors or for science, based kind of work. So.
I just wanted to express my thanks for the little piece of the video about taking food out to their neighbors. I struggle with not falling into a power struggle with my meeting, my Quaker meeting, because I want them to do so much more. And when I'm feeling particularly irritated, I'm like, sandwiches for the homeless are great, but we have like this crisis on our hands, people. And it occurs to me that if I can find the equivalent of sandwiches for the homeless, which might be buying LED lights for a neighborhood, it might be something concrete and physical that might help me, at least emotionally, to get out of the power struggle. Because I don't, I really do understand that slapping people around isn't going to help them to accept, climate catastrophes, but it's so frustrating. So I appreciate that alternative very much.
Thank you. That reminds me of a story. If we've got it, I won't take too long, but it was just hot off the presses, that big document, 2 pages. And we were sharing it with a Wild Goose group. And one of the members of the group said, I'm a Presbyterian, and I've been working with my congregation to do recycling. This is before COVID was going on. And every fellowship hour, we have a blue recycling bin and a regular trash bin. We put it in the bulletin, how to do it. We've talked about it from the pulpit. We've had it in the newsletter. And every Sunday for a year and a half, I've been going and putting trash out of the recycling and recycling back into the recycling from the trash. And she was so angry. She was visibly just upset and angry. And she said, I just don't want to go to church anymore. I'm so upset with them because they don't care about the earth. There was this sense of like, they don't care about the planet. And that was when I realized I had just handed her a list of 56 other ways that her congregation may or may not want to help this creation care work. And so that's where we begin to like really think about this as a discernment practice. And Mary Jo, that's just what you were doing. Like, I think this like, all right, well, what's already comfortable for them? I mean, we can try to get people to stretch, but what is kind of indigenous to the community, and then work from that versus what tends to happen, which is like, I want to recycle. I'm excited about recycling. Let's get my church to recycle. And they may not want to recycle, or they may, we don't have the funding for whatever, or we don't have the backs to do a garden. And so, so I think that's right on. It's like, that's the dance of the wisdom and the urgency. The urgency is like, we need to do it all today. And the reality is, some people just don't want to, or they have some other passions. How do we do both? So that's,
well, maybe I guess in a way, if we could, which we have done a lot of, and creation care folks, we were creation care, and then we're calling ourselves eco justice now. And before we've done several educational things, and in social justice we've done a lot of educational things. And so maybe there'd be maybe we do a few more, and then do sort of a congregational wide discernment, because I well understand from past experience what it's like to run something for an organization, but the whole community is not completely behind it. It's like, so, not something that takes months, but just some way to get people to input what the community itself would be interested in doing.
Mm-hmm.
Once they've heard about a few things, if we want people to do actions, they really do need to have some will behind it, some interest. So
In the toolkit, in that link that you have, there is all of those, all these documents that I shared are in that. Like you can find it in PDF forms, and then also a webinar that's similar to what you just saw, or you can actually use this one too if you wanted to use it with the creation care team of your congregation or anything like that. Like you can do it on your own and just kind of work through this same process to get a starting place or an excuse to get people together that are like-minded, or green sheep of your congregation, some people might say.
Hey, Scott, I want to just say thanks to you personally. I have to jump off to get ready for the next session. So I'll see all of you. We're going to do a quick closing, but you guys have a few more minutes. So I didn't want to disrupt, but I also don't want to just disappear without saying thank you. So
great. And what time is the next session?
The next session starts at 4:40. So you have
Okay.
another like 10 minutes to chat, and then people can transition. And we're just going to do closing and talk about what's happening tomorrow. And yeah, it won't be long. All right.
Okay.
And bring
Thank
what
you.
you've learned, because we want to hear from the groups. We're going to ask what people learned in breakout groups. So that'll be fun.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask Sarah, where are you? And I mean, I just caught some of your remarks while trying to multi-solve this afternoon, as Jennifer said.
Our new word, yeah.
Yeah, so not solving the problem of listening all the way. But you just said some amazing things. I want to thank you for that. And
Thank you.
Where are you?
So I'm in Western North Carolina. That's where I live. I live in far Western North Carolina, in between Boone and Asheville in Mitchell County. I'm about an hour 15 from Charlotte. So that's where I am. But I work for the North Carolina Council of Churches and North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light. So we're a statewide organization. So even though I'm living, here, I'm working statewide, and working with the various partner organizations. Amy's one of my partners. Scott, when he was doing work at CCA, was one of my very close partners and is still a partner doing work with many other wonderful organizations. So yeah, that's where I am. And I put in the chat, I sent to you, Nancy, and I can also put in the chat just to everyone. You may have heard the ncchurches.org/advocate page. As you're moving into that advocacy orientation, there are some good calls to action that your congregation might might be ready for. So I wanted to offer that.
In the chat.
Mm-hmm. I'll drop it for everybody as well. I think one thing I was going to say is just that I think, and it's what was just said, one of the best and most beautiful things about this to me is that question of how do you accompany the spirit that is already moving? How do you move with, and to me, that's beautiful too, because it evokes those feelings of co-creating and of, not
that kind of energy for anything to really get off the ground.
Right. So where is there some energy? Where is there some Holy Spirit, some, or using other language, whatever, just some divinity, some calling to you that might be a place to begin. And I did also drop into the chat, Mary Jo, I'm sorry, the article about the LED, an article, more about that, because I do think it's a great story, like you were naming. It's a really good one to highlight.
Yeah, so where was this? I'm trying to see.
Was muted. It's really interesting because we actually have a written minute on care for the environment at Charlotte Friends. It's beautiful. It's beautiful writing. They who did it did a wonderful job on it. And it's almost like the pain of sitting and waiting for that to manifest is more than people are comfortable with. And I'm struggling right now. I was 2 minutes ago struggling right now because our meeting does a worship sharing with another meeting, and I'm supposed to have the queries written like now for the meeting. And I didn't have them until you spoke, Sarah, and I can use that as my second query, the spirit that is already manifesting now. And that has been my continuing experience. The more I do this work, the more the gifts arrive. And I just feel sad for so many people who sit and say, I just only want to do action. I don't want to sit quietly. but I know that that's where some people are. So my continuing challenge to be supportive.
I do think one thing too, speaking to that, one of the things that Scott brought up too, I love adaptation and mitigation as a framing before you dive into the, all of the different things you can do. And part of what I loved about that and what I love about that is thinking about how we not only love a neighbor, but love ourselves, because this work is draining. And so I think when we're thinking about silence and sitting,
Draining.
what did you say, Nancy?
Well, we're in the middle of trying to lift off. We're in the middle of a week of major lift off of various things, and I am tired.
Yeah.
Maureen is too.
Right. It's the work of loving and doing and striving for justice and trying to be there for people, and it's hard and it's tiring. And so ways that we act, and then ways that we remember that replenishing and silence are ways that we also sustain ourselves and act as well. Those are also really valuable actions to sustaining the movement. I used to be someone that only valued the kind of side on the urgency, and I wore myself out real fast. So trying to find that balance, I guess I'm just naming that striving for balance,
Right,
which is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for all this. It's great.
Thank you. It's a gift.
I missed much of it just because I was trying to get in here.
Oh,
Yeah.
But I'm glad I figured it out.
Yeah.
So Nancy can fill me in, hopefully.
And I guess the recordings will be shared because everything's been recorded. So
we'll get
somewhere.
We'll get an email that.
I guess so, probably.
Chris Lakin is also at St. Peter's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello,
Got
Chris.
3 of us on here.
Yeah.
Hello.
Chris, you need to join our committee. If you're on this call, if you're in
Am I
this.
being drafted?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
you are.
Okay.
Great. Easy.
I'm on board.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's great. One more great thing about this workshop, you got a full team.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a wonderful thing.
Oh, thanks, Joel. Joel just told us that Clean Air Carolina is making the recordings available. That's awesome.
Okay.
Who is making them available?
Clean Air Carolina.
Okay.
They're one of the organizing groups.
Well, do you guys want a little bio break before the closing worship space?
that would be nice.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Great.
Y'all, good luck with everything.
Yeah, good to be with you guys. Good to see you, Scott.
Blessings. Is it all right if I give a little prayer at the end?
Yeah.
All right. This is inspired by Thomas Merton. Basically, it's his words. I just adjusted it a little bit, so it's more of a blessing kind of a thing. The tree gives glory to God by being a tree. For being what it is meant to be honors the author and actors of all life. The more a tree is like itself, the more it is like the divine. This particular tree will dance in glory by spreading out its roots in the earth and raising its branches into the air and in the light in a way that no other tree before it or after it ever did or will ever do. The special clumsy beauty of this colt on an April day in this field under these clouds is a holiness consecrated by creative wisdom. It declares the glory of God. The pale flowers of the dogwood, the bristled needles of the pine are saints. The little yellow flowers that nobody notices on the edge of the road are saints looking up into the face of the sacred. This leaf has its own texture, its own pattern of veins, its own holiness. The bass and trout hiding in their deep pools of the river are canonized by their beauty and strength. The lakes hidden among the hills are saints, the saint the sea too is a saint, singing without interruption in her majestic dance. May we be saints, beloved as we are, and invited to see the sacredness of one another, creatures and neighbors. May it be so.
May it be so. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I guess we